Well, on that note, as we had promised earlier, it's time to deep dive into another very pertinent conversation. And this conversation will, in fact, be a precursor, if I may say, even to the launch of the ET and Futurescape 8th Sustainability Index, the ESG report. And joining us this morning, we have two, if I may say, powerful speakers and people who are actually at the forefront doing the work and leading it by example. One of them, of course, being a noted actor of the Indian film industry, also an activist. We have with us Nandita, and we also have with us Namrata Rana, Director Strategy and Brand, Futurescape, India Ambassador of University of Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. So with that, it's time to deep dive into this very powerful session and a very important launch as well, with two very, very important dignitaries joining us. Let's take a look.
Hi everybody, it's great to be here today on the occasion of the launch of the 8th sustainability study that we've been doing all these years as in partnership with Economic Times, and this study actually began in partnership with Economic Times, Futurescape and IIM Raipur, and there have been a lot of people that have supported us in this endeavor. And the most important thing today is that for companies that are navigating the changing policy and regulatory systems, the writing is on the wall. They either have to change fast or become irrelevant. Climate change and digital transformation are creating new risks, and at the same time, new opportunities are opening up too. Our study actually focuses on many of these aspects where we try to understand what organizations are doing, how they are navigating the changes, and what is the kind of leadership that is needed to actually navigate this transition into a greener, cleaner, sustainable world. And I have Nandita here with me, and I want to really ask her what is it that people can do themselves. I mean, of course, there are things that can be done at a process level, at a policy level that organizations can do, but after all, organizations are led by people. And what is it that needs to be done to lead the people transition?
Thanks, Namrata. I don't know whether one does it to lead others, but you do it as more a way of life because, all of us are being impacted by climate change, and we are seeing the environmental impacts of even policies and even what we think is doing good for our economy. Oftentimes we just measure things in terms of money, GDP and all of that, but not in terms of the environmental impact it has. So while these things seem very large and we feel that we are such a small drop, even if we do make a change in our lives, how is it really going to impact? But I do believe that every drop counts. And, finally, if we do not make those small changes in our lives, then we have no business to even complain about climate change. So if we once acknowledge the fact that the world is changing for the worse, and we as human beings are the biggest abusers of this planet, because if we got extinct, I think the world would still flourish, the planet would still flourish. But because we are consuming so much constantly, we're trying to satisfy our needs, our wants, our desires, that I try and do in my own little life. I mean, in the sense that it's still a long way to go, because over the years, what were your luxuries slowly start becoming your needs. So you have to constantly, be mindful about the fact and sort of differentiate between what is a luxury and what is a need. What is it that you want and what is it that you genuinely need? So every time I think you push your line, you have to ask yourself that could I really do without it? And this is a conversation. I mean, after becoming a parent, I think I've become far more conscious, because your child, I have a son, I have an 11-year-old son, but even when he was really much younger as well, children always call out your contradictions, your hypocrisies, things that you say, and the thought action gap that we talk about. So if you say something, but if you're doing something else, then they will immediately talk to you about it or tell you about why are you doing this. So, and also if we believe that we want to teach good things to our children, they are not going to only listen to our words, they are going to emulate what we are doing, what they see around themselves. So I think that has also made me far more conscious as to how we can save little things, whether it's, paper pad, or like I always use, it's in fact right here, like, just a paper pad where I write all my notes. This is his Hindi homework. These are my notes. So, these are small things, because I love stationery. And in my earlier, like maybe 20 years ago, I used to see a beautiful notebook and I would buy it. And now with the advent of computers and screens, we constantly end up typing and we don't really use that much of great paper. And, so now I keep those for gifting because it's still beautiful, and whatever I have to make sure I give away. But we try and use as much of used paper. For instance, even on his birthday, I wrote to all the parents and said, please do not give gifts, recycle your gifts. If your child has gotten bored of some gift, it's still going to be new for my child. So why don't you give, sort of used gifts? So consciousness about water, because water is so cheap in our country. And I don't even think we know how much water we consume or how much do we pay for it. What we pay is so negligible, but we don't know how much water and other sources of energy it takes to just, let's say, purify water so that it's potable and drinkable for us. So I think just having those conversations around you, just being mindful about everything that you use, air conditioned, flush and shower. And we've just got all these amazing inventions that we have just been born into almost, and we don't realize that if we would use it judiciously, it would last longer and more people would be able to use it. Because again, my child often talks about the huge disparity that we have sort of normalized, the rich and the poor, especially in a city like Bombay. It's so stark. And sometimes he says, how did this even happen? And I should always tell him this Gandhi's quote, which is, I think, very relevant, that there is enough for everyone's need, but not enough for even one man's greed. And, so I think just being a little mindful change, you can make a lot of small shifts that hopefully decreases your role in it. And hopefully, if everybody thought like that, maybe we would make some little visible shift.
That's so interesting because, there are many times that I really think that we are raising consumers rather than kids, right?
Exactly.
So, right from the minute that they're born, there is this entire story which is around consumption, the age of the child and consumption, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We start thinking about that. And the other big concern that I have many times is that a lot of children's toys are made of plastic.
Absolutely, yeah.
Quantity of plastic that is going into them. So in a way, it's and I'm not against any specific material per se, but at one point in time, I also feel that this entire behavior change can't really come in a world that is so consumption driven. The entire philosophy of entertainment is that it is advertising driven. Everything around us, even when we travel, we are endlessly consuming the travel experience. We are endlessly consuming everything else that is around us, and companies thrive on that. And
they are deciding, in fact, our needs. Sorry to cut in, but I just meant that they are deciding. The market forces, the advertisements, they are deciding what we want. Like, it's like you create a certain need with this thing that you want to then provide. And you're absolutely right about plastic toys, which are just, what do you do? Like, for instance, Legos. It's very popular with kids. It's a wonderful game as well. You build, we try and get those wooden blocks. There is a lovely game called Kapla. And, I got it in Europe, and they're just little sticks. They're not even colorful. They're not different sizes. They are same size sticks. And in fact, because there is not a set pattern, children come up with innumerable creative ideas of building all kinds of things. And my son has been engaged with it for several years because the building or whatever they're constructing keeps getting more and more complex.
Is it an issue of design then? So at one point in time, so there's this entire consumption story is about excess. It's about the materials that we use. it's also about poor design. When
Yes.
all these products were designed, nobody really thought of the fact that where will they go eventually?
Absolutely. No, but we can think now. I mean,
We can
it's
think now,
already
it's
too
just
late.
our
It's
time.
already too
It's
late.
already too late. And so, and it's perhaps time for us to actually start debating this, discussing this. And in our study, what we really found was that this transition towards a clean, green, and maybe a net zero kind of a world really needs a rethinking of materials. It needs a rethinking
Absolutely.
of the supply chain. So, a supply chain is not going to be a green supply chain if the design of the product is wrong, if the materials that we use are wrong. Brand purpose that we see on television with a lot of brands talking about, a higher purpose beyond themselves is again not going to stand for anything unless you're inherently sustainable, unless you're inherently using renewable energy, renewable sources of materials and so on. So just brand purpose to drive distinctiveness, that my brand is different, is not really brand purpose per se. It's great advertising. So perhaps there is
Exactly.
time to think deeper about many aspects that are all around us that we take for granted, that we don't necessarily give that kind of importance to. And I would like to call upon all business leaders to really rethink
Yes.
their product marketing communication strategies.
And I think, like material, so communication can only happen when you have really noble intentions of making that difference, of kind of almost apologizing for adding this enormous amount of, let's say, plastic that they've been using for a long time, and saying, okay, whatever mistake we've made, now we are going to rectify and we're going to use it with another material which is more sustainable, which is biodegradable, or whatever it may be. So, and companies obviously have a much bigger role because they are more impactful. They reach out to a lot more people. Their products reach out. So advertisers, companies, individuals, teachers, I mean, everybody has their role to play. So it's really for each one of us to kind of not only blame each other, but also see that what can I do differently that's going to change the narrative of our planet. We are really impacting it. So definitely the material would be a big help if people would use less plastic and not just talk about plastic bags, which are still comparatively, less harmful than the enormous amount of plastic we use, like in toys or in things or in, kitchenwares and whole lot of things. So definitely that would be very, very useful. But also this idea of reusing. If like our mothers and grandmothers, if one bottle finished, they would put the dal in this bottle and then still put it. This whole thing of everything looking perfect, everything has to have sort of the same cap, or the, like fashion over or just the looks. We've become far more into how things look than the purpose that it really holds. So just this thing of reusing, recycling, all of that, I think, as has to be taught not just to children from a very young age, but also we as adults have to unlearn a lot of things and think about where we can make that difference.
That's so true. And when I was, when they told me that we'd be speaking to you, I just thought that, sustainability is about fire, the energy that we use, the water
Yes,
that we need to save, and ultimately it's all about the earth.
absolutely.
And these are the most important things that we need to be conscious of, that we need to be aware of and look after.
The
And it's
material we wear, things,
the
simple things
material
like
we
that, the amount of clothes we have. We are really, I mean, all of us here, we can safely say that we are extremely privileged, and we always have more than what we need. And there are various organizations like Gonj and various other organizations. What they do is they take things, whatever is extra, they take from you, they clean it up. So if you give a shoe without a lace, they'll actually clean it up and put a lace. Or if you give them a pajama without the string, they will actually put the drawstring, clean it up, and then give it. And they don't just give it as charity, they actually give it in places where there is a need, and it's always in lieu of work. So villagers make their own pond, their own road. So it's always for work. It's an exchange of a barter for work for clothes or work for whatever other material.
Because
so there are so many such organizations.
Because see, that gives value.
And dignity, right?
It's not about waste then. And I want to call upon all the top 100 companies in our rankings to actually do much more than what they've been doing. And it's been delightful to see the journey of many organizations from where they were to where they are today. There has been a constant uptick in the graph in terms of environmental performance. There has been an uptick in the graph in terms of social performance as well as governance standards. But we all realize that this is just an icing on the cake, and we have to rethink our systems. We've got to make systemic shifts for us to do a significant transformation of our world. And this is the decade of transformation. This is the decade.
And we could all do more, for sure.
We can all certainly do more. And I would like to sort of thank everybody for supporting us and being part of our journey. And thank you so very much, Nandita, for your time.
Thank you, Namrata, and thank you for launching this report. I'm sure it's going to be very useful for all of us, and especially for companies that genuinely want to rethink. Thanks.
Fabulous. Have a great day. Bye.
You too. Thank you.
Thank
I must admit that I'm actually enthused after this conversation, because there are 2 to 3 different and important salient points rather that I also managed to learn. One, of course, is when Namrata had mentioned about the environmental performance. We as companies are often looking at the sales performance, at the performance of the company, the growth, revenues. And I think somewhere environmental performance is also the need of the hour as to how is it that we're doing whatever we do, whatever targets we set, how is it actually contributing towards the environment? And as Nandita had also mentioned, it's all the little things that we do. We don't need to take up gigantic steps and for that matter, initiatives. It all boils down to the little things that we can do in our daily lives as well that can make the right kind of impact. So I do believe that it's boiled down to something as important, yet as basic as this. And it is indeed the need of the hour. So once again, I'd like to thank Nandita and Namrata, because it's also the official launch of the Sustainability Index, the report there. And I'm sure it'll be absolutely helpful to also take a look as to how the top ranking companies have sort of come up with some new initiatives in order to ensure that they do their bit for the environment. So with that, after that interesting conversation, what we're going to do now is actually get to hear from the brands themselves, the top ranking brands, as a part of this report, as to what are the initiatives they've taken in order to address the sustainability factor. In fact, we'll be having our next address by Nisaba Godrej, Chairperson and Managing Director, Godrej Consumer Products Limited. So stay tuned as we get to hear from Nisaba Godrej.
Hello, I hope you and your families are well and staying safe. Thank you for inviting me to speak at this important summit on sustainable development goals. It is my pleasure to be here today. Godrej was founded in our country's freedom and Swadeshi movement to build for an independent India. Ardeshwar Godrej, our founder and an ardent nationalist, donated a significant share of our profits to the Tilak Swaraj Fund, making it the single largest contribution back then. We first made soap during the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918. It was the first soap in the world to be made from vegetable oil and not animal fat. Sustainability has always been core to who we are, not just nice to do, but critical to our strategy. Committing to place our people and planet alongside profit is also part of how we define trust, our core value. Over the last year, I found myself repeatedly reflecting on how we started out to understand how we can build forward. Our fundamental beliefs continue. That is, that the business of business is goodness. For us, goodness translates into how we build a more sustainable, safer, and equitable world. But it's not enough for sustainability to be critical for business. This needs to be more personal for me, for you, for all of us. For me, this it really matters as a parent. Becoming more sustainable is the right thing to do for my children and the world I leave them. Growing up, my father always emphasized the trusteeship of wealth, which means that we don't really own anything. We hold Godrej in trust for future generations. Our commitment is to make it better and stronger. This commitment extends to our environment and our communities. At Godrej Consumer Products, our purpose of bringing the goodness of health and beauty to consumers in emerging markets has never had deeper meaning or resonated more strongly than it does right now. The impact of COVID-19 is not just an unprecedented public health crisis, but also an economic crisis impacting the lives and livelihoods of billions of people globally. This is more pronounced in the emerging economies where we operate, given pre-existing socio-economic inequalities. But like we have seen in recent months, COVID-19 is just one of the many worrying curves we need to flatten. We have had our share of bad news over the last year, and there is more coming. A series of potentially catastrophic events triggered by climate change is just around the corner. The recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report reaffirms that we need to cut our emissions in half by 2030. Only then will we be within the safe threshold of the 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming limit by 2050. But we are poised to reach that limit a whole decade sooner. Why should this matter to business? The World Economic Forum reports clearly lists climate change as a catastrophic risk to business and profitability. Implications include supply chain disruptions, price instability, and commodity shocks, among others. Our world is increasingly interconnected, which means we can't escape this impact. The devastation of the last year is ample proof of what can and will happen. Actively helping address this is therefore not just the right thing to do, but also essential for business. What our businesses do in the next 10 years will be critical for their own survival and that of our planet and all of us. Do we know what we need to do? Yes, that's the good news. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development has crafted 9 pathways for the sustainable transformation of business. These pathways are aligned with sustainable development goals that can help solve wicked social and environmental problems. At Godrej Consumer Products, our sustainability vision, roadmap, and action plan for 2025 is aligned with these pathways. We already source over 30% of all our energy from renewables. We have reduced our emissions by almost half from 2010, and we recharge more than 3 times the water we use, and we send zero waste to landfill. We will now aim to scope 1 and 2 carbon neutral by 2025. We will also announce our commitment towards the Global Science-Based Targets Initiative for emissions reduction. Our business purpose will be critical in enabling this. From our strategy and operating model to our culture and our values and our brands, we are embedding our purpose across our business. Sustainability and social impact help us live the Godrej way. Our Embed Elimination of Mosquito-Borne Endemic Disease program is a good example of this. Bringing the goodness of health to people in emerging markets is core to our purpose, and household insecticides is our biggest product category. So we are deeply committed to working towards a malaria-free world. We started Embed in 2016 in collaborations with NGOs and state governments to run intensive behavior change programs in regions with the highest malaria transmission risks in India. We work in each village for 3 years and spread awareness among the most vulnerable and marginalized groups in tribal, hilly, and hard-to-reach areas. Till date, we have reached over 3.5 million people. Our impact studies show promising outcomes. During Embed, 67% of the community developed awareness about malaria, and 63% started taking steps to prevent malaria after our awareness sessions. Our big learnings from Embed is that development problems are interconnected, deep-rooted, and require large scale systemic change and innovation. We can't do it alone. In fact, no one organization or government can do it alone. That's why we want to focus on partnership, bringing our employees, our partners, our communities, and the government together to ensure they all become ambassadors of change. This starts with leadership. So we have set up a sustainability council at our board of directors to oversee progress and provide direction. As companies, I always say this, that one of the issues is that we tend to talk about our best selves, especially at a forum such as this. I too have done that, but now I want to tell you about our true self. At Godrej, we often say that we're only as good as what we do next. We have made some good progress on sustainability, but there is lots more to do. In the first 10 years of our sustainability journey, we focused on sustainability in production and our operations. As we look at the next 5 years, with all the changes in the global context, developments in science, technology, and data, we realize that our approach needs to pivot to the much broader concept of sustainable consumption. There is a shift in our consumers' preferences. People are increasingly making choices based on how sustainably a business operates rather than just on what it sells. Our sustainability goals always need us to be very agile and experiment constantly. We have learned that it's okay to not succeed every time. We may not have all the answers. What is important is that we keep experimenting till we find a solution that works. Take alternative packaging for our plastic-intensive packaging material. We are yet to crack this, but we don't treat our efforts as a loss. Our aim is to experiment and be ready to adapt to newer ways of thinking while doing so. There's also innovation for greener products. We've had a few successes, such as Goodnight Passcard, which is a paper-based mosquito repellent available at just ₹1 per use. Our innovative powder to liquid magic hand wash is the world's most affordable and sustainable hand wash, and we hope we will help democratize hand washing. It uses half the plastic packaging compared to a regular hand wash refill and only a quarter of the fuel to be transported. And it even has a lower footprint than bar soap. But we need to do much more. We need to align our product design and sustainability teams to work more closely. We need to create a sustainability framework for developing new products that are greener across the value chain. It's not going to be business as usual anymore. And what really excites me is that innovation, if we open our minds, anything is possible. We've seen how fast vaccine development can happen. Some of these companies had vaccines out the door in 6 months' time. We're talking about people bringing down timelines from 10 years to 6 months. So and everything does not have a green premium to it. So I feel that innovation, and if we're open to it and willing to move fast, we will be able to do so much more. We've just entered our 125th year at Godrej. At this time of unprecedented crisis, we will be remembered for the choices we make now. As a company that has always championed sustainability, our commitment is to shift from a do no harm approach to a much more proactive, do good approach. To borrow from my favorite book of last year, Untamed by Glennon Doyle. So she says in the book, the deepest truth is not what we can see, but what we can imagine. Perhaps imagination is not where we go to escape reality, but where we go to remember it. We must believe in and imagine a better world for our children and get down to the hard work of change. It will take all of us doing much more within companies, ecosystems, and personally to create these shifts. We are fortunate to be at a turning point in the story of our world and to help craft its trajectory. Let's explore this tremendous opportunity and responsibility we have to address the biggest social and economic problems of our time. Thank you.
Well, hearing it from the leader herself, Nisaba Godrej, it's indeed quite riveting, in fact, to understand as to how these companies, or for that matter, how they as leaders are doing their bit in order to add up to the sustainability factor, and not just to adhere because it's just a buzzword, but because it is the way of life, as also mentioned by our previous set of speakers. With that, let's also try to understand the initiatives taken by the next company that's also featured in the top ranking companies in the sustainability index, the report that has just been launched. We have a message from Neeraj Kanwar, Vice Chairman and Managing Director, Apollo Tyres. Let's take a look.
Dear friends, it gives me immense pleasure to be part of the ETSDGs Summit. Sustainability has been a strong enabler in our journey, and we have continuously focused on it to take our operations from strength to strength. I thank Futurescape for ranking us at the 12th position in India's top 100 businesses on sustainability. It is indeed heartening and reaffirms our faith in the tenets of sustainability and value creation, and motivates us to climb higher in years to come. In its more contemporary format of ESG, environment, social, and governance, sustainability is becoming even more relevant. The demand for transparency on sustainability and social responsible practices is rising. We as leaders of companies are accountable to our stakeholders, such as investors, customers, our employees, our communities, and civil society. Interestingly, investors believe companies that perform well on ESG are less risky, better positioned for the long term, and better prepared for uncertainty. A strong ESG proposition can help companies attract and retain quality employees, enhance employee motivation, be instilling a sense of purpose, and increase productivity overall. There is no doubt that the path to ESG will create long-term value for all stakeholders. Apollo Tyres has always believed that sustainability is not just a good to have, but a must to have attribute for any organization aspiring to generate continuous value for its stakeholders. With this value proposition, we have taken a framework approach to etch sustainability principles into our core operations and business goals. We embarked on the journey of sustainability by syncing our growth agenda with the initiatives on environment, conservation, social prosperity, and economic well-being. Our sustainability strategy highlights how ESG holds the center stage and how we endeavor to be the industry leader by pursuing new emerging opportunities and continually embedding sustainability to our business model. A major shift over the past years has been the integration of sustainability into all levels of the corporate strategy and business model, as well as our value chain. To reach out to a wider range of stakeholders and communicate our sustainability performance, we started making disclosures based on international guidelines way back in 2010. These disclosures have been instrumental in assessing the actual performance, setting benchmarks, and supporting our journey of the triple bottom line: social, environmental, and financial. We had adopted ISO 26000:2010, an international standard on social responsibility, and have been on a journey to develop our sustainability governance model in consonance with guidelines of the set standards. The company has defined its Sustainability Roadmap 2025 with 6 key focus areas: combating climate change, working towards circular economy, establishing sustainability, a governance model, building a responsible value chain, fostering our people-centric approach, engaging with our communities. These are 6 pillars that we are working on to further strengthen our sustainability journey. The first pillar, climate change, is now a stark reality. The recent IPCC report has further underlined the need for urgent action to stop irreparable loss. Climate adaptation is one of the key considerations in the automotive industry. An important representative of the automotive industry value chain, Apollo Tyres, has been working on this aspect within its zone of influence. We have been measuring and monitoring our carbon footprint. To promote a climate-conscious manufacturing setup, we have invested in renewable energy as well as various energy-saving initiatives. In addition, we invest in climate adaptive efforts in our communities like mangrove conservation in Kerala and afforestation in Tamil Nadu. We have embarked on internally developing our own commitments to 2026. Our end goal is to be carbon neutral before 2050. We have undertaken a detailed climate risk assessment as per the Task Force on Climate-related Financial Disclosure Framework. Accordingly, we have been reporting to the Carbon Disclosure Project on climate change. As a part of the wider theme under climate change to capture the hotspots that we can work on to decrease our carbon footprint. As a part of our endeavor to be environmental conscious, we have a commitment to increase the sustainable raw material mix to 40% by 2030. Sustainability is pivotal for any entity to remain in business in today's scenario. It has proved to be an enabler for delivering value to all the stakeholders across the value chain. I'm very confident that in times to come, ESG aspects will further deepen their significance in building resilience of companies, irrespective of their scale and type. I'd like to thank you for listening to me. I'd like to stay safe and all the best. Thank you.
Well, all I can say is with Apollo Tyres, they're surely accelerating themselves towards a sustainable future with the kind of initiatives that have been shared by Mr. Neeraj Kanwar. With that, let's also move forward towards understanding all the initiatives taken up by Tata Chemicals Limited. In fact, our next message is by R. Mukundan, Managing Director and CEO of Tata Chemicals Limited. Let's take a look.
Thank you, Kavya, for the introduction. We are deeply honored to receive this recognition to be amongst leading companies in ET and Futurescape's responsible business rankings. Sustainability is at the heart of Tata Chemicals' business ambition. In line with our corporate responsibility objectives, we have adopted pioneering activities that contribute to thriving planet, communities, and enterprises. We are building a long-term resilience and are contributing to India's sustainability aspirations. The team at Tata Chemicals are rapidly embracing and inviting sustainability across all our business divisions and initiatives. We have joined the Science Based Target Initiative and have set our carbon reduction targets to correspond to well below 2 degrees by 2030. This ranking reinforces our commitment to responsible manufacturing, business and human rights, biodiversity conservation, and firming up of our existing process to meet United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Some of the areas we have focused our attention includes reduction in carbon dioxide emissions, reduction in freshwater withdrawal, commitment to circular economy, and regular energy audits which help us to achieve better energy efficiency. Last year, we also adopted 2 policies, one on business and human rights, and the other on biodiversity, linking it with our value chain. As an Indian company with operations across the world and being from Tata Group, we are fully committed to the vision of government and the community on climate change, and will continue to work relentlessly towards it. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mukundan, for that very crisp and yet a very important set of words that you've shared with us. With that, let's now move forward to the closing remarks of this particular segment of the launch of the report. In fact, as Namrata had mentioned, that Economic Times came forward along, or for that matter, collaborated with Namrata and also Professor Utkarsh Majmudar, who's a member of the Board of Governors, IIM Raipur, in order to bring forth this particular report for all of you. So as in a way to sort of sum up this particular launch segment for all of you, let's also hear from Professor Utkarsh Majmudar, member of the Board of Governors, IIM Raipur.
Years ago, Namrata and I sat down and tried to figure out how we can rank companies on their business responsibility. At that time, most of the rankings centered around the amount of money that people were spending on CSR. And we said spending money can't be the right metric. So we spent some time to try and figure out what parameters companies should focus on to improve their CSR and sustainability. Now, at that time, things had just started evolving. Between then and now, lots of changes have taken place. The mandatory CSR came into play. The Paris Agreement happened. Sustainable Development Goals were also rolled out, and the goals were set for 2030. The recent interest that has developed in the area of ESG is thanks mainly to banks and financial institutions. And that has led to a significant focus on achievement of net zero targets by 2050. So all this has happened in the recent past, which has made us make changes to our study and improve our study significantly, which ensured that all the changes that were taking place got incorporated in the study. We found that over time, companies have improved their performance on all three parameters of ESG, environmental, social, and governance, which is absolutely great. Right? This shows that corporate India is keeping pace with all the changes that are happening around them. In the end, I would like to thank all the companies which have been with us in this journey and look forward to looking at these companies, scoring them, and seeing their performance improve year by year. Thank you.